Hi, we are the bees and we are presenting our project simulating population dynamics of a predator swarm system using boids. Swarming behavior in animals have evolved because it brings an evolutionary advantage. Some of the advantage is to avoid predators, finding food, and finding a mate to reproduce. Craig Reynolds developed a computer program in 1986 which simulates the flocking behavior of birds. The program was based on three simple rules. Separation, which is shown in figure A, where each boy tries to maintain a minimum distance from its neighbors. Alignment, which is shown in figure B, where each boy tries to match the direction and speed of its neighbors. Cohesion shown in figure C, where each boy tries to move towards the average position of its neighbors. These rules are applied to the boids and result in the boids moving together as a coordinated swarm. The predators spawn with 100 health points, which decay 1 by each time step. If a predator catches a boid, it regenerates health. If the health go above the threshold for reproduction, the predator reproduces, spawning another predator randomly in the box, and then rest, meaning it moves slower and can't catch or chase a boid until the health decays below the threshold. If a predator's health drops to 0, it dies and is removed from the simulation. The food particles was added for the boids to consume. The food particles are spawned randomly within the box at a specific rate. These food particles are consumed by the boids, they producing, spawning a copy of themselves in the same position as the food particle that was consumed.
To simulate this system, we implemented the model in Python. Since we have an agent-based simulation, we use class objects, so we had a predator class, a boid class, and a food class. In the main script, the simulation box was created, the class objects interact, and the system evolves over time. The model uses periodic boundary conditions, meaning that if an object crosses the borders of the box, it reappears on the opposite side of the box. To observe the behavior of the object in the system, we visualized it in real time using a 3D scatter plot. To make this possible, our code needed to be able to simulate all the interactions between the objects fast enough. For this, we used an algorithm called KD tree. The algorithm divides the space into a tree of subcells depending on the locations of the points. When querying this tree for nearest neighbors of points, the calculations become much more efficient for large simulations compared to brute force looping over all the points. The calculation time increases with log n compared to n squared for brute force.
Here we have an example of the simulation. Here we plotted the population dynamics as a function of time. We can see that we get this kind of oscillating dynamics, which is very common in a predator-prey system. Overall, the system behaved pretty stable, but what usually happens is that the predators die out. This is probably because the dynamics ran pretty fast, and if the predators got unlucky for a while, they would simply die out. And here we have a visualization of the simulation. The blue particles are the boids, the red is the predators, and the green particles is the food. And as we can see here, the boids are swarming around each other, consuming the food, while avoiding the predators. Next up, Felix will talk about how the swarming rules affect the population dynamics.
In the beginning, we mentioned that swarming can be an evolutionary advantage. To investigate that, we looked at how our system behaves for different swarming strengths. The swarming of our boids is determined by 3 different parameters, one for each rule. In this graph, we show how our populations evolve for different cohesion strengths. For each cohesion strength, we made 5 simulations over 5,000 time steps. We rejected the first 1,000 time steps to let the system equilibrate, and then we took the remaining time steps and all 5 simulations and took the mean and showed it in this graph. We can see a slight downward trend for the boid population for increasing cohesions. So in our model, it's actually bad for the swarm to stay close together. For the second rule, for the alignment, we did a similar simulation, and we can't really see a significant effect in our simulation. The same for the third rule, the separation. We did the same simulations, and we can't really see a significant large effect for different separation strengths.
The present model has quite a lot of issues, but one we believe to be major contributors to the inaccuracies of the model are listed below. Currently, the boids in the simulation are pseudo-immortal because they can only die from being consumed but never from starvation. This in turn affects the population dynamics in the model. In addition to this, both the boids and predators in the model reproduce directly by either consuming the food particles or the boids. When the reproduction threshold for a boid is reached, a copy is spawned randomly nearby, regardless of if another boid is close by. This means that the advantage of always having a possible mate in a swarm out in nature is neglected. Lastly, the predators in the model go towards the mean of nearby swarms, which leads to slight confusion in their behavior, as in nature, but it won't replicate the disorienting property of schools of the same species out in nature. In conclusion, it seems that our model is able to partially mimic the behavior of swarms trying to avoid predators. It still has a few inaccuracies, but is a decent model to see the population dynamics of the system. Currently, though, it is not good enough to draw accurate conclusions of the effect of swarming on the population dynamics of the system. Thank you for your time. We will now be opening up for questions.